Hi, I'm Jean Cummings with Politico, and it's time to turn the table with Harry Smith, who's sitting in for Bob Schieffer, moderator of CBS's Face the Nation. Harry, President Obama this week gathered Middle East leaders at the White House for the first direct talks in 2 years. Now, many presidents have tried this, and all of them have failed. What is different this year?
Boy, I think there are a number of different factors, not the least of which that in both neighborhoods it has been relatively peaceful, except for this murdering of the settlers a couple of days ago. Relatively speaking, compared to the last couple of years, many fewer attacks on civilians in the Israeli neighborhoods, no Katyusha attacks. It's been relatively quiet there, which I think in some ways it should be seen as a good sign. I think one of the other things that's really important here, and I kept thinking about this the other day, was, who is the one who ends up helping bring peace? Who ends up being a game changer in these sort of tectonic shifts in history? And it was Richard Nixon, who was one of the great anti-communists of the 20th century, who opened the door and said, "I'm going to China." So who knows? Here's Bibi Netanyahu. He said it himself to the Council of Foreign Relations earlier this summer. Maybe it takes a hawk in order to bring peace. Maybe it's ripe this time. I know that's been said, innumerable times in the past, but I think, we should cross our fingers and maybe even pray that this is the time that it'll work.
Now, on another front, this week, the president delivered on a campaign promise by announcing that combat missions in Iraq have ended and basically returning the page on the war. And what I'm curious about, Harry, is that we had the White House focusing on two really important foreign affairs issues this week, but the voters only talk about jobs. So Can the president get a bounce? Can he break through on these issues at a time when domestic politics is really driving the conversation at home?
Yeah, I don't know if there is a level of frustration or not, but you have all these really important foreign policy issues, and not the least of which is especially Afghanistan. You're coming through a summer, an incredibly deadly summer in Afghanistan in terms of American forces being killed and put in harm's way. As Iraq is quieting down, you look at the poll numbers in terms of people who said, we never thought this was a good idea. Changed over the last 7 years, certainly, but a lot of people said it wasn't worth the adventure, it wasn't worth the 4,400 Americans who died there, let alone the $700 and some billion that it cost to fight that war. So you have all of this stuff that's out there in terms of really important energy and an intellectual capital, yet at home, we see the job numbers today tick up another 0.1%. You've got millions of people who have even stopped looking for work. You talk about a full agenda. This White House is having to deal with, it's almost like the old Ed Sullivan show. I don't know if you're old enough to remember it, but there was a guy that would come on Sunday night and he'd try to spin the plates and keep them all spinning at the same time. That's the White House right now. Their whole thing is to just try and keep as many of them spinning as possible. And I'm not so sure it's doable, considering the depth and the importance and the difficulty of all the different plates that need to keep spinning.
Well, given that type of agenda, where do you go this Sunday? Tell us about your show. What are you going to be talking about?
Well, Bill Clinton said it best. It's the economy, stupid, and we've got some great guests on Sunday. Laura Tyson, former chair of the Council of Economic Advisors, Mark Zandi, the great economist, and Gretchen Morgenson from the New York Times. We're going to be talking about the economy, and that's going to take up the greatest portion of the show. There are reports in the Washington Post about new tax credits for people who want to hire new folks. Will the Bush tax cuts be rescinded, or who might they end up being affected by? And then at the end of the session, we've got Nancy Cordes and somebody from your neck of the woods. Jim is going to stop by, Jim Vandehei, to talk about the political climate in some of the most important races, midterm elections come November, which is not so far away. So all that and more on Sunday on Face the Nation.
That's terrific. It sounds like a great show, and I have to confess to you, I was little, but I was alive for Ed Sullivan.
Okay. Very good.
Thank you, Harry.
All right, take care.